Director of Witness to Mass Incarceration, and this is a new project collecting in-depth interviews for formerly incarcerated people for the purpose of memorializing their stories. And so, I think something that's very important is that it's kind of get caught up in looking at our incarceration system and seeing that approximately 2.5 million people are incarcerated every single year, or involved in incarceration every single year. And that's a daunting number, but I think stories tell a much better perspective. So I'm going to stop talking and let her go for it.
I want to thank Andrew for setting this up. Thank you all for coming, and make mention of the fact I'm lucky enough to have a dear friend who's also formerly incarcerated, Teresa Hodge. Raise your hand. She is a local celebrity with her local organization, Mission Launch, which primarily focuses on reentry. We met each other through a program that a gentleman named Glenn Martin, who's very much on the national scene talking about half by 2030 and wanting to decarcerate prisons. He took 20 people from across the country who were formerly incarcerated and created a leadership program. So Teresa and I are two of the cohorts of the 20 people from this leadership program. So you saw my title, Rich, Old, Queer. So we're going to talk about that. I was rich, I am old, and I am queer. So that's for starters. And approaching prison from any of these, and I'm white. So I have a very particular, there's a different reaction to me being in prison. But before I tell this story, I want you to understand where I'm coming from. While I think it's important to tell stories, for each of us to tell our stories, what my larger purpose is to make sure that there's some compelling reason to change the current system. My story alone will be interesting, there'll be parts you'll laugh, there'll be parts you'll want to cry, as with everybody's story. But my story is not going to make any change. It's just going to be entertainment for a night. And so what I want to do is make a difference. And how I've chosen to make a difference, now Witness to Mass Incarceration is brand new. I have done one interview. So I'm the director of something that has taken one interview. But I'm hoping to affiliate with a university because I think we need to set a precedent and memorialize America's 40-year history of mass incarceration. And how do you do that? You do that, from my point of view, everybody's going to have a different point of view. You do that from having a closed-end interview, which is what I want, because having been in prison, I have at least 100 topics I want to cover. I don't want to cover one little piece, like I want to cover 100 pieces. And the only way you're going to get 100 pieces is to sit down and ask the questions. What's your family background? What happened in your family background? How many prisons are you in? You've got to get a database that's so broad, and then tell the stories you want to tell. How many children did you leave behind? Did you get medical attention? What happened to your teeth in prison? I want the basics, and I don't want it to be sexy. I want it to be factual. So the collection of 10,000 or 1,000 interviews will give me common denominators, so that if I want to pull a 2-minute clip here and pull a 2-minute clip there, you're going to see the same thing over and over. You're going to see mothers saying, "Mommy, when are you coming home? Mommy, when are you coming home?" And it's going to kill you to hear that, not from just one woman, but from every woman who had children that were outside, with the questions, with the letters from their children. And you want to see that repetition. So hopefully this will be the basis. It will do it at a university. I haven't figured out which one, but I have to affiliate because the students are going to be my interviewers. I need 20 to 30 interviewers. And I'm very much modeling it after the Shoah Project, which was built by Steven Spielberg, which is, to my mind, the only genocide/Holocaust that has been documented. And because it was documented, people can go there and look at everything that happened to everybody. And it's used by scholars worldwide, it's used by students, used by everyone. On the bus here, I passed a billboard that said Armenian Genocide, and the website was Armenian Genocide 2015. I was working on a master's in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and hardly anybody knows the Armenian Genocide. And so I said, oh wow, they're trying to capture information now, and the Armenian Genocide was in 1918. There's no living survivors to tell this story. So I want there to be I want the 40 years of mass incarceration to be covered in the story, starting with the older people first. A perspective on why. You mentioned 2.5 million people, which is a number that's quoted all the time. But that's not a static number. That is a fluid number, with 700,000 people coming out and 700,000 people coming in, 500,000 people coming out, 500,000 people going in. 12 million people enter the jail system. Many of them are there for a month or a day, but 80% of the people who enter the jail system can't afford to pay $250 or $500 in bail. So they end up being incarcerated, in effect, for being poor. And they can be in prison for a month or a year. We support a prison economy that's estimated at being worth $35 billion a year to private companies. There is no incentive for anybody to stop doing the business of prison. It not only supports major corporations, but where Teresa and I also happen to be, in Alderson, which I'll get into, Alderson, West Virginia, the women's federal prison, there's nothing in that town but the prison. So if the prison wasn't there, there would be nobody employed. So the prison is an employment program. And everybody in Alderson was someone's cousin. So I think the whole town is 3 families. So they all have the same last name. It was creepy. And in addition to it being an employment place, you have to understand that when the families of 1,000 women come to visit, they bring business to that town. They stay in the town, they eat in the town, they shop in the town. So that town only thrives. And there are 5,000 or more prisons in the United States and jails. And they intentionally put them in way far away places where it's a town's entire income. So when you understand that the reason we've had, in 1970, when there was only a couple 100,000 people in prison, all of a sudden you see a 40-year jump from 1 million to 2.5 million. Crime has gone down, but prisons are loaded with people, and today they're still building more prisons. So what's the reason? And the reason should be obvious. The more regulations, unfortunately, prosecutors don't answer to anyone. There are at least 4,000 laws. There are at least 700,000 regulations. Using that much ammunition, you can arrest anybody for anything. Look at what happened in Indiana this week. A woman miscarried, she's getting 20 years because of feticide. You can put anybody, and they put them for longer sentences because the corporations need those beds filled. So you've got, unfortunately, business in bed with government. Is this a new story? Is this surprise anybody? It should shock the world if they understood what happened to us. It should sit on people's conscience that not 2.5 million, but probably 20 million people have been, 65 million people have been convicted of a crime, some crime in America. That's a huge number on a 300+ million population. 20 million people have got to have gone through prison at some time. And then if you multiply the family, brothers, sisters, children, parents, significant others, you multiply the family, we've impacted 100 million people in America in some fashion, yet there's no outcry. And even if there was an outcry, to stop business, it would take a major advance that I have not personally seen, since Vietnam. We just don't have the people in the streets. And just to age myself, I was one of the people in the streets. I'm a baby of the women's movement. When I walked into prison, I was already a radical. Okay, I was in the women's movement, the gay rights movement, as it was known then. I marched in civil rights demonstrations. My mother, I would come into the house and my mother would say, I don't know, it could be the ozone today or the rainforest. I have no clue what she's doing, and I stopped counting. Because that's what the 60s were like. You went out for everything and you marched with people, and you had 1 million people in the street. And even though you had 1 million people in the street, you somehow found your stoned cousin behind a tree and smoked a joint with him or her. But you found your friends in 1 million people. It must have been the same stupid tree, but we always found each other. And there were 1 million people, and it was fun. And we felt it. And you need that energy. So the only way that I know how to cause some damage is either structurally, financially destroy them. Make it financially, it's great to do divestitures, but how I'm hoping to see it happen is wrongful convictions. Wrongful convictions come out of prison and they knock them up for millions of dollars, and it becomes financially less viable for them to consider prosecuting someone unless they have a good case. And fortunately or unfortunately, when a man gets killed and it's on video like yesterday, or it's a horrible thing, and I don't want it to happen for the sake of change, but since it happened, I am glad this officer is being charged with murder, because you have it on tape. We need more evidence, and we need compelling reasons to make change. So having said that, my story is one story, but I want you to understand the context. I speak publicly to educate. I speak publicly because I want to tear down the system, one brick at a time, whatever we have to do and for how long. And I hope that you'll get angry enough to want to do your part and get other people to do their parts, because you have 40 years of history where most of the people inside prison are poor, are black, are brown, and are suffering. And it's got to stop. So take that context. I consider myself, I do want to quote one person that when I study this stuff and I read as much as I can, there's one person who's kind of my hero. It's Robert H. Jackson, the Attorney General for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who later became the Chief Justice and who was the Chief Justice at the Nuremberg trials. And my parents are Holocaust survivors, so I studied the Holocaust and I knew Robert Jackson's role in Nuremberg. What I didn't know is he spoke to federal prosecutors in a very famous speech back in 1948, so we're talking, what, 65 years ago? And said that we have so many rules and so many regulations that the day will come that prosecutors pick their cases, not the crimes. And they'll pick how to arrest people because they have so many options. Well, the day is here, and that is what's going on. So he's a very interesting man to read, and I highly recommend it. The other thing you have to realize is crime is down. So who's in prison? You know, again, crime is down, it's at the lowest point. So what we've done is invented, both Teresa and I were in prison for nonviolent crimes, and you have a proliferation of women being arrested. If what's going on is your life gets destroyed, you're absolutely destroyed the minute you're arrested. Everything you've worked for, in my case, I worked 30 years prior to being arrested. I built up a living. I made enough money so that in the mid-1990s, I was set to retire and do philanthropy work or do cause work for anything I wanted to do. Your life can be ruined in a moment because they have the capacity. Just charging you with a crime is the end of your life, as you know it. And I will also say to you that, just to put it in your head as I'm telling you the story, once you're arrested, until you go to trial, it's one stage of your life that's extremely difficult. You're looking over your shoulder. you see a police car on the street and you think they're going to arrest you. It's a very fearful time. Then you go to trial and you lose or you plead guilty and you're going to jail, and all of a sudden you're dealing with having to get your life in order. Then you're incarcerated and you walk in and you say, what the fuck am I doing here? How did I get here? You're in disbelief that you can be behind bars, and then you talk to other women and you hear their stories, and you're in disbelief any of them could be here. So it's not until you actually get to prison and you start talking to other people that you realize most people are convicted on nothing. And then you come home. And home is hard because most of us came home. If you don't have family, you're coming home homeless and penniless. I have a great Cartier watch, but I can't afford to put a battery in it, so it's been 1:30 for 3 months. I didn't know whether I'd tell you that, but what the hell. My case, I had made a lot of money. I was a money manager. I lived in the Hamptons. I wasn't a Hamptons person, but I was a workaholic living in the Hamptons. There's a difference. And I was doing so well that I needed to hire someone to run my business. The only thing that I wanted to do was trade stocks. It took all my energy. I knew how to make money, and I wanted someone to deal with my taxes, write checks, deal with lawyers, talk to the clients. I didn't have a lot of clients. It was a private hedge fund, but I wanted someone substantial. Some friends called me, and I wasn't really looking for anybody. Some friends called me and said they have a friend who's in Manhattan who's had an architectural business for 20 years. She wants to start a new business, and would I look at her proposal and consider investing in her business? So this is an architect who wants to go into a business that she's never done, and she wants a $1 million investor. So I met her, and I said, look, nobody's going to invest $1 million if someone has not tried this. It's like me being a heart surgeon. Not a good idea. You have to take $50,000, make a demo model, show it around, get a small case, and establish yourself. She didn't like that answer. So I said, okay, I'll give you another idea. You've been in business 20 years, and I really want to focus on trading, so I will pay you a good salary, and you can bank most of that salary to do the demo if you run the business, since you've run a business before. My biggest mistake was that I didn't check out her credentials. Well, she wanted that $1 million. She came in, she took the job, and stole $4 million from me. And when I gave her permission to use the checkbook and write my checks. I didn't know she'd write them to herself. And I didn't look. So that's on me. I didn't think it was possible for someone to steal like that. It just wasn't even in my brain. And I was someone who came out of a very trusting family, so when you talk to me, I assume you're telling me the truth. Maybe not today, but back then, yes. I just didn't think someone lies right to your face. So she stole this money, and when I discovered it, I filed a lawsuit for millions against her. Within 2 months, I was arrested. Instead of her filing a response to my lawsuit, she went to prosecutors and said that I didn't pay my taxes for the 1995, 1996, and 1997. And there was an additional mail fraud count. So I said, I don't owe any tax money. I sat down with a forensic accountant who redid my taxes and produced zero-based tax returns. So I figured, what the hell, I'll just bring the zero-based tax returns and the forensic accountant and all my books, and it'll be over. And I'll show them that in her bank account, there's $4 million of mine because we had that evidence too. Shockingly, they didn't care. They had already made her a deal that she wouldn't have to pay money on her taxes and that I was going to be their target. And you'd think logically, well, you're a logical person, so this can't be happening. There's no money in the bank to show that I owed any. the arrest charge said the following, that I and my live-in lesbian lover, I have no problem with someone calling me a lesbian because I am. I have a problem with somebody saying I had a lover, which I didn't have, or that I even lived with her, which I didn't. But this is 1997. And you have to remember the times, it's not today. What the government, she handed them a case and said, oh, she changed her version of this so that if you look at all 4 of my charges, there's a different version in each 4 charges. So I looked at the 4 charges and I thought, well, that's simple, these don't match. Let's just show them they don't match. They don't care, they'll charge, they won't take you to court on all 4 at the same time, and nobody will care what the government wrote. And as I got into my case, I thought, are you telling me I'm going to prison for doing nothing? And the answer was uniformly yes. So the government decided to try this case, and in every document, you hear the government talking about me being a lesbian, me having a lover, live-in lover, me giving the live-in lover some money, and me hiding money. And I was going nuts because if I have a, that's my phone, it's not shutting up. Maybe you could turn it off. It's in my pocket. Every time someone tweets or sends an email, I get birds singing, you know? You had the Defense of Marriage Act, you had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You had a homophobic world that didn't want to know from anybody being out. And the prosecutor had made the calculated decision that if he brought me to a jury and just said the word lesbian, he'd get a conviction. And he's right. He was 100% right. Even if I denied that we were lovers, the word was still out there, and the word was the death of me. He did not have to prove tax evasion, and he didn't even try. All he had to do was make the suggestion that I sneaked money to another person. It was disgusting, but that's what happened. I spent, from the time I was arrested, which was 1997, it took the government 12 years to take me to trial because 4 assistant U.S. attorneys did not think it was a good case because I had a way of saying, here's my bank statements. I don't owe you anything. And they were scared of that. But the 5th U.S. attorney was what they call a lifer. And this lifer called me into a room and said, I'm going to put you in prison for 25 years to life. And I said, for what? He said, because I feel like it and because you won't plead guilty. They cannot tolerate someone willing to go to trial because it costs them a lot of money, it's a pain in the ass, and they would rather intimidate you by saying, most of the women that I knew that were incarcerated, pled guilty because a daughter was threatened, a son was threatened, apparently. The prosecutors use family to try to make you plead. 98% of people plead guilty, and you ask yourself, in America, is there any other business that has this track record? No. They only have a track record like this because they cheat. And I make no bones about that, they cheat. And the primary target is intimidation. So 12 years later, in 2009, I went to trial, I lost, and I entered Alderson Women's Federal Prison in Alderson, West Virginia, where everybody has the same last name. And I self-surrendered, which means I flew myself